Hi, I am Rick Vizio, and this is part 5 of a 6-part series. It's the Educated Franchisee series, educational series on FDDs. My name is Rick Vizio. I'm the author of The Educated Franchisee, and I'm a franchise coach working with people who want to explore and learn more about franchising. And we are honored today to have Nancy Leonard, our legal beagle, who's spent most of her career doing nothing but helping people understand more about franchising from a legal point of view. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
All right. So we are going to really start, we finished part 4, we finished with item 14. So we're going to carry on now with item 15. Item 15 is obligation to participate in the actual operation of the franchise. And this is an interesting one because a lot of people don't even realize that's a question. And so talk to us about it.
Well, so some franchise systems, you can be an absentee owner. You can be hiring management to run the business and be an absentee owner. And this section is going to talk about whether this particular brand allows you to do that or not do that. A lot of my clients want to continue to work in their jobs that they have and are looking to invest in a franchise opportunity and have others run the business. And this would address whether that's permissible or not.
Absolutely. And that's basically what it does. That just says, do you have to be there full time and fully focused on the business or not?
Exactly.
And the fact is there's a number of franchises out there where you do not. And there's an equally large number, maybe larger number, where you absolutely must. Right. And you need to know that before you make a decision.
And I think the majority actually are the ones where you have to actually be running it and operating it full time. But there are some where that's not the case. There are some where they disclose that you can run this as an absentee owner, and it turns out you can't. So again, back to what you and I have discussed through this whole, 5 that we've gone through, part 5 discussions today. We've discussed how we should talk to franchisees in the system. And that's another question to ask. If you're thinking of being an absentee owner and item 15 says that's okay to do that, talk to franchisees and find out their experiences and whether it's been successful for them to be absentee owners.
Yeah, whether it's legally acceptable doesn't necessarily correlate with whether it's it works from an operational point of view.
Right.
It just means that they would allow you to do it should you choose to try to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Correct.
But I'll tell you, if it is a franchise system where you are required to be full-time, you rarely find it in here because they normally tell you in the very first few conversations with you, they're going to quiz you on that. And if you're not going to do it full-time, they'll probably cut off the conversations. That's something the franchisors usually, they're not going to normally make a mistake on that during the vetting process, at least what I have found. If they want you to do it full-time, they're going to tell you.
The other side of it is, though, that there's sometimes where they tell you, it's fine to be an absentee owner. And then you find out that it really isn't. It's not really going to be something that works.
Yeah, it may not be proven out to actually work that way. That's possible. Yeah. So good deal. Let's talk about, that was item 15. Item 16, restrictions on what a franchisee may sell.
So this is kind of in line with the restrictions on sources of products and services that we talked about, which was item 8. So in this one, there may be certain things that you're not allowed to sell or that you're required to sell. And this, it's what are the restrictions on what you are permitted to sell. So if you are in a beauty salon, we talked about that earlier, using that as an example, blow dry bar or whatever. Can you sell t-shirts? Can you sell, t-shirts with the logo and the brand on it? Maybe, maybe not. This is going to tell you what you are allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. And it may not be all inclusive. There may be actual beyond that, there may be things in an operations manual that give more guidance on that, but this is going to tell you what you can and cannot sell. It kind of goes in line with, as I said, item 8, which is where you can buy those things that you can sell.
Yeah, doesn't a lot of times it basically will say you can only sell the stuff we say you can sell, and it's all in the operational manual, which can change from time to time.
Exactly. That's why I mentioned it. The operations manual is a fluid document. It's always a part of your franchise agreement. So it is contractually considered part of that contract. It's not something that you get before you've actually signed the franchise agreement. So that's a real, conflict or issue because, you're signing a franchise agreement with an operations manual that you're bound to that you've never seen. Yeah. So it's an issue, and that operations manual can change anytime. on their whim.
Yeah.
They have sole discretion over what's in it and what they change from time to time.
I think just to put that in perspective, though, and just that I've talked to people who get concerned about that, and the reality is the franchise agreement is a fixed document over 5 to 10 years at least. But the world is not a fixed world. Competition changes, things change, and so you need a document that allows for evolution and for growth. And I think that's really where the operational manual is. So there's a risk, of course, right, that they could change something that you don't like. But at the same time, if they can't evolve, a decade later, if you're doing it that way and no evolution has been allowed to occur, wouldn't it cause them a problem?
Well, I agree with you 100%, because taking my example of the blow dry bar, first of all, 10 years ago, I'm not even sure those were around. So 10 years from now, we don't know
That's right.
what they're going to look like. And years ago, I represented a group of very high-end card and gift stores. And initially, when they started out, they only had cards. It was a card store, and gifts became a great ticket for the franchisee and for the franchisor. It's very lucrative. The profit margin was pretty high, and it brought customers in who might not have come in just for cards, and they spent a lot more money when they left. And so that fluidity, as you're describing it, is important, because if the original franchise agreement only contemplated cards, and now they're selling cards and giftware, and the giftware is actually where the money is, you would want that.
Yeah, you want it. It allows you to flex and to grow and to remain relevant in the marketplace.
Right.
Assuming it's done, the leadership husbands the prospect well, kind of manages that project well.
Yes.
Let's talk about item 17. This is a legal beagle area. We got renewal, termination, transfer, dispute resolution. Again, it has a chart. It has a chart. So that's good. But this is obviously always very complicated, and a good thing to understand a little bit about how this works.
So this is a really critical area. And of course, this is an area that's discussed in length in the franchise agreement, which is the contract. This area in item 17 is to disclose to you what the contract says. Basically, so I'm holding up my chart so you can see that there's a chart, right? Yep. And that's kind of what it's going to look like. And it's going to have such things as the length of the term for the franchise. As you mentioned, it could be 5 years. That's unusual. Typical is 10, could be 20. That's also unusual these days. Although years ago, franchise agreements were 20 and 30 years in duration. They're not so much anymore. The advantage of being a dinosaur in this conversation here.
They had some that were in perpetuity. The O'Culligans were in perpetuity.
Oh, there were some that were in perpetuity, and questionable whether that was legal or not, but there were some that were. But
or smart.
Well, definitely weren't. That wasn't smart, but but probably also not legal ultimately either. There's a rule against perpetuity, and yeah, so that it may not have even been legitimate.
Different video. We'll let that one lie.
Exactly. But anyway, things such as, like the title says, renewal, the term, the termination. Does the franchisee have a right to terminate the contract if there's issues? What are franchisors' rights to terminate the contract down the road? What are the rights with cause? What are the rights if there's no cause? And within the rights with cause, there's different levels of cause. Some have immediate right to terminate. For example, in your Popeyes or Church's example, if you're selling food that's not kept at the right temperature, or you're not doing things in a way that is that the product is spoiled, or there's a problem, you're going to be kicked out of the system. They can terminate that, I'm sure, immediately without notice or anything, because that's a major violation. However, if you maybe are late in your payment to them of the royalties or those other kinds of things, they usually give you notice and some opportunity to cure that default. So there's different levels of cause that with different results that go along with that. Cause is defined in here, franchisees' obligations, and what happens if there's a termination of the agreement, or if the agreement expires. What is the franchisee's obligations at that point? Is the franchisee allowed to continue to operate a competitive business? I can assure you probably not, but that will be in this section.
Other than California.
Maybe. But that will be in this section. What are your rights to as a franchisee to assign this contract? What is the franchisor's right to assign it if the franchisor sells the franchise business? Can they assign all of the contracts? All of that will be covered in this item 17. So as I said, it's a chart and it's pretty comprehensive and people should be looking at it. It's pretty important.
Yeah. When you look at things such as transferability, it's also important because there are a few franchises out there, I'm not going to name names, but very, very popular, very well known franchises that people are always excited to get into. Oh God, I wish I had or whatever. And when you look at the transfer, it says NA.
Yeah.
Means that you can't transfer. And the reason you can't transfer it is because you don't own it.
Right. Well, I do a lot of resales of franchises, and I can tell you there's always issues with any franchise resale. I mean, they happen all the time.
Yes.
I'm working on about 6 of them literally right now.
Yep.
And some of them are for millions. So they can be very lucrative, but there's all kinds of issues. Often in the situation where you can't assign a franchise agreement or transfer it, doesn't mean you can't sell the business. It still means, what it means is that that new buyer would have to enter into a brand new franchise agreement. They can't take over your franchise. And that's actually pretty common. It's actually pretty common that a buyer of a franchise enters into the then current version. And that's usually what it says, even, right?
It always happens.
Right. Even when there is an agreement that says you can assign, it's the then current version, then current. Sure. So whatever the clauses are in that current version of a franchise agreement. The other issue in a resale, by the way, is the goodwill. And how is that attributed? Because most of the goodwill in any franchise business belongs to the franchisor also. Mm-hmm. So it's the trademark, it's that brand, and it's the customers that came under that brand. So how do you attribute goodwill to a resale?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a complicated area. It's important to understand. Part of the value of getting into a business is to build something that has value.
Yeah.
That not only creates a cash flow, but also creates a value, an asset value that you can then sell and have a really pleasant exit.
When I was at Nutrisystem, I can tell you that there were many franchisees that sold for millions.
Yeah.
But it was a very lucrative franchise. They did very, very well.
That's the goal. And so
they
gives
did
you that ability to do that. Yeah. So yeah. All right, let's talk about item 18, arrangements with public figures.
That's another one we can gloss over pretty quickly, because that's just if any brand, any franchise system out there is using public figures in their advertising or in their logo, if they're using somebody's image in a logo for the trademark, that's what that relates to, and it's pretty uncommon, I think.
Yeah. Occasionally people have it and it's subject to the license agreement, and that's basically it. So
correct.
Yeah, good deal. All right, so we're going to end this one. We're going to save item 19 for the last part, the 6 of 6. All right, so this is the end of part 5. And again, if you want to contact Nancy or myself, contact information is at the end of the video. We're going to terminate this particular one, the part 5, and then we're going to jump on to part 6. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks.